When Pope Leo XIV requested Karoline Leavitt, America's rising young political star, to remove the sparkling cross from her neck during their first meeting at the Vatican, the world didn't just react, it was stunned. In the majestic room packed with reporters, cameras, advisors, and Vatican dignitaries, Leavitt entered with radiant confidence. She bowed in greeting, her smile beaming, her voice full of respect. A perfect image for a historic moment, but the Pope did not respond. He stood still, his gaze calm, his hand gently resting on the simple wooden cross on the altar behind him. "Take it off," he said, his voice low, firm, resounding like a decree. A suffocating silence enveloped the room. Not a whisper from the press, not a movement from the advisors, not even a frown from the cardinals. All eyes turned to Leavitt, representing power and hope now caught between two worlds, the glamour of politics and the depth of faith. A moment expected to symbolize unity became an indelible mark of a silent yet profound message. Faith lies not in dazzling appearances, but in surrender. Holiness needs no golden glow, only a humble heart. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. St. Peter's Square buzzed with energy. Early sunlight filtering through the grand dome, illuminating the crowd of pilgrims and reporters gathered outside. Bells echoed, blending with the murmurs of tourists and the clicking of cameras inside. The Apostolic Palace marble hallways gleamed with light from candles leading to the meticulously prepared audience chamber. Chairs were neatly arranged, cameras set up, and Vatican officials in red vestments stood solemnly, their eyes betraying tension. A young Cardinal, Lorenzo Bianchi, quietly adjusted his watch strap, anxious about Pope Leo XIV's unexpected action. "He's unlike anyone," he whispered to an aide, asking her to remove the cross. "This will cause a storm." Pope Leo XIV, the first American. Pope stood alone in the Siene Chapel before the audience. His simple black cassock contrasted with the splendor of the frescoed ceiling. Robert Francis Prevost. His birth name had been a devoted priest in Peru, wandering through impoverished villages, witnessing the suffering of people in conflict. A memory flooded back. A widowed mother, hands trembling, gave him a rough wooden cross. "It's not beautiful," she said, "but it carries my pain and my hope." Seems that very cross, now on the small altar in the audience chamber, shaped his mission. Faith lies not in ostentation, but in sacrifice. When elected pope, he refused gold-embroidered vestments, choosing a black cassock and a plain room without tapestries. For him, the cross was a reminder of duty, not a symbol of power. Meanwhile, on a private jet crossing the Mediterranean, Karoline Leavitt sat with her team of advisors reviewing a carefully crafted speech. At 27, she had risen from a New Hampshire girl to White House press secretary representing the Trump administration's hardline immigration policies. The sparkling cross around her neck, a gift from a donor, was not just a symbol of faith, but a political statement. It had graced magazine covers, been praised in campaign speeches, and solidified her image as a young, strong, devout leader. "This meeting will define me," she told her chief advisor, Sarah Mitchell, who frowned while looking out the window. "This pope is unpredictable." Karoline Mitchell warned he's criticized our policies on social media. Leavitt shrugged, tapping her speech. "I'm not here to argue. I'm here to make a mark." In the audience chamber, tension grew. Reporters from CNN to Reuters whispered about rumors of Leavitt's surprise visit. Political star faces American Pope. A headline was already spreading. Cardinal Bianchi, standing near the altar, silently prayed, worried that the Pope's action might be misunderstood. He knew the Pope acted not for the media, but for faith levity. In an elegant blue dress prepared to enter her eyes, blazing with ambition, she envisioned a photo shaking hands with the Pope on every front page, cementing her status. But Pope Leo XIV, standing quietly by the altar, his hand lightly touching the wooden cross, was ready for something entirely different. He didn't want a political meeting. He wanted a transformative moment for Leavitt and the watching world. The audience chamber doors slowly opened. Karoline Leavitt's high heels echoed on the marble floor, each step like a drumbeat heralding a historic moment in the Vatican audience chamber. Candle light from the walls reflected off the sparkling cross around her neck. A dazzling gold piece adorned with gems, casting colorful rays. Reporters from CNN, BBC, Reuters, standing behind red velvet ropes, aimed their lenses at her cameras, clicking like a prelude. Vatican officials in scarlet vestments stood solemnly, their eyes cautious. Chief Advisor Sarah Mitchell, clutching her notepad, tried to suppress her anxiety. Cardinal Lorenzo Bianchi, near the small altar, slightly furrowed his brow, sensing the atmosphere shifting in an unpredictable direction. Pope Leo XIV stood quietly by the altar, his hand lightly touching the rough wooden cross placed on white linen. His simple black cassock highlighted his humility amidst the splendid setting. Leavitt approached her practiced smile, like an actor stepping onto the stage. She stopped a few steps away, bowed slightly, her voice clear and confident. "Holy Father, I bring greetings from the American people and my deepest respect." The atmosphere suddenly grew heavy. Pope Leo XIV looked up, his piercing gaze seeming to see through her soul. He did not return her greeting, did not extend his hand, did not smile. Instead, he slowly pointed to the sparkling cross around Leavitt's neck. "Take it off," he said, his voice low like a gentle but undeniable command. The room fell into absolute silence. The clicking of cameras stopped. A Reuters reporter dropped a pen, the sharp sound ringing like a small explosion. Sarah Mitchell drew a sharp breath. Her eyes panicked. Cardinal Bianchi shook his head slightly, as if to say, "I warned you." Leavitt stood frozen, her smile fading, replaced by a bewildered look. The cross, a sacred symbol of Catholic faith, worn as a declaration of herself, now asked to be removed. In front of the international press, before those expecting her to shine pride, surged but a spark of curiosity crept in. "Holy Father," she said, her voice slightly trembling but striving for composure. "I don't understand your cheesecake. Ice." Pope Leo XIV stepped to the altar, lifting the wooden cross, its scratched surface catching the dim light. "The cross is not for display," he said, his voice slow like an ancient tale. "It is a call to bear others' pain, a promise of sacrifice. What you wear is a symbol of the world, not of God." His words, though gentle, pierced Leavitt's confident facade like a needle, reporters whispered. Phones lit up with social media posts. Pope challenges American political star. Leavitt felt her cheeks flush. She wanted to argue, to defend her image, but the Pope's gaze stopped her, not judgmental, but inviting. She glanced at Sarah Mitchell, who shook her head as if saying, "Don't do it." But a memory surfaced a Sunday morning in a New Hampshire church, holding her grandfather's hand, looking at the wooden cross on the altar. "Faith isn't for show," he said. "It's what you live for." Those words now bridged her to this moment. Her hand slowly rose to her neck, touching the sparkling cross. the cool metal contrasting with her warm skin. The press held its breath, cameras zooming in. Cardinal Bianchi looked up, his eyes faintly surprised. Sarah Mitchell bit her lip, bracing for a media disaster. But Leavitt, in an unexpected move, removed the cross and placed it on the altar. The sound of metal on wood rang like a declaration. She looked at the Pope, her eyes no longer confused, but resolute. "I'm ready," she said, her voice soft but firm. Pope Leo XIV nodded, not in approval, but in acknowledgement. "You've taken the first step," he said. "Now let us take the second." He led her to the altar where the simple wooden cross lay. "Kneel," he said, his voice gentle yet firm. Leavitt glanced around, the eyes of reporters, advisors, and Vatican officials fixed on her. She felt like an actor on an unscripted stage, each move potentially defining her career. But the wooden cross, small, rough, held a strange allure. It wasn't for political platforms. It carried a weight she didn't yet understand. Leavitt knelt, her blue dress touching the cold marble floor. Pope Leo XIV knelt beside her, his hand on the wooden cross. "This is the true cross," he said, his voice a whispered prayer. "It needs no light. To shine for it carries the light of sacrifice." The press, accustomed to political performances, fell silent. A Reuters reporter scribbled frantically, sensing this moment transcended news. Sarah Mitchell, clutching her notepad, felt her heart race. "Cardinal." Bianchi gave a discreet smile. On social media, the news spread like wildfire. Leavitt kneels before the Pope. One post read, "Wooden cross replaces golden cross. What happened?" Another commented, "But in the room, the moment belonged not to social media. It belonged to two people. A Pope with a mission to lead. A young politician facing a profound question. What is leadership?" Pope Leo XIV looked up, his gaze gentle but resolute. "Let us pray," he said. Leavitt, unsure of what lay ahead, nodded slightly. The wooden cross, small but powerful, seemed to tell its own story, one poised to change both of them in the watching world. Karoline Leavitt knelt on the cold marble floor, her blue dress spreading, like a quiet pool under the dim light of the Vatican audience chamber. Before her, the rough wooden cross lay on a small altar placed on a simple white linen cloth. No gold, no jewels, only scratches telling a story of pain and hope. Pope Leo XIV, kneeling beside her, his black cassock brushing the floor, touched the wooden cross with a tenderness as if cradling a precious relic. His deep, serene gaze seemed to belong not to the room filled with reporters, officials, and cameras, but to a far-off place where faith transcended all glamour. The room remained steeped in odd silence. Reporters stood motionless, camera lenses trained on the two figures kneeling before the altar. Chief Advisor Sarah Mitchell, in a corner, clutched her notepad, her eyes wavering between worry and astonishment. Cardinal Lorenzo Bianchi, near the altar, bowed his head slightly, as if praying this moment wouldn't be misunderstood. The press's whispers had ceased, replaced by anticipation, as if the world held its breath for what would happen next. Pope Leo XIV raised his head, his gaze sweeping over Leavitt, then resting on the wooden cross. "Lord," he began, his voice like a stream flowing over stones, gentle yet powerful. "You carried the cross for us, not for glory, but for love. Today, teach us to bear our cross, not for display, but for service." He paused, his hand gently tracing the wooden cross, as if feeling its story. The story of the Peruvian mother who gave it to him in her grief. Leavitt, kneeling beside him, felt her heart pound, as if his prayer touched a hidden part of her soul. She closed her eyes, trying to focus, but her mind drifted to distant memories. She recalled Sunday mornings in a small New Hampshire church, sitting beside her grandmother, listening to sermons about Jesus' sacrifice. The cross isn't decoration. Her grandmother had said, her voice warm but firm. It's a reminder that love means pain. Those words, forgotten in years of political ambition, returned now clear and sharp, like light-piercing fog. She opened her eyes, looking at the wooden cross before her. And for the first time, she felt it wasn't just an object, but a call to live differently. The Pope continued praying, his voice echoing in the sacred space, as Jesus said, "Whoever wants to follow me must deny themselves and take up their cross." The cross is not a burden, but the path to truth. He turned to Leavitt, his gaze not commanding, but encouraging. "Karoline," he said, calling her name for the first time, "are you ready to carry this cross, not around your neck, but in your heart?" His words, simple yet profound, made Liv exposed in the light. She was no longer the White House press secretary, no longer a political star. She was just Karoline, facing the biggest question of her life. What was she living for? She nodded slightly, saying nothing, but the gesture was a commitment. Pope Leo XIV gave a faint smile, not ostentatious, but shared between two souls. He lifted the wooden cross and placed it in Leavitt's hands. Its rough surface pressed into her palms, a stark contrast to the smooth sparkle of the cross she once wore. It was light, yet carried a strange weight. The weight of responsibility, of faith. "Keep it," he said, his voice gentle but certain, "not to wear, but to remind you of the path ahead." Leavitt held the cross, her fingers tracing its scratches. A strange peace washed over her, as if the weight of ambition and the spotlight were dissolving. The press, still silent, began capturing the moment. A Reuters reporter near the altar scribbled, "Leavitt receives wooden cross, a history-changing moment." Cameras zoomed in on her hands, the wooden cross and the Pope's eyes, as if the world were witnessing a wordless transformation. Cardinal Bianchi, still near the altar, let out a quiet breath. He had feared the Pope's action would be misconstrued, but now seeing Leavitt hold the wooden cross, he felt a spark of hope. This moment was more than a media event. It was a sacred lesson, a reminder that faith transcended political boundaries. Pope Leo XIV, still kneeling, concluded his prayer. "Lord, grant us strength to carry your cross, not for glory, but for love of others." He stood gesturing for Leavitt to rise with him. She stood still, clutching the wooden cross, her eyes no longer uncertain, but filled with newfound resolve. The room began to stir again. Reporters, as if awakening from a dream, started scribbling and whispering. A BBC journalist in the corner turned to a colleague. "This isn't news, this is history." Sarah Mitchell, still worried about the American public's reaction, couldn't deny that Liv looked different, not weaker, but stronger in a new way. Pope Leo XIV stepped closer to Leavitt, placing a hand on her shoulder, a simple but meaningful gesture. "You've chosen the harder path," he said, his voice soft but clear. "Keep walking it." The heavy wooden door of the small chapel closed behind Karoline Leavitt, its faint sound echoing like a whisper in the quiet space. Light from a single candle on the altar flickered, casting shadows. On the ancient stone wall, where a simple wooden cross hung silently under the dim glow, Pope Leo XIV, his black cassock brushing the floor, stepped toward the altar, his hands gently tracing the wooden cross live. It still clutched tightly. No more. Press no more cameras, no more scrutinizing eyes of advisors or Vatican officials. Just two people, a pope with a mission to guide, and a young politician at a crossroads of her own. Leavitt, still in her blue dress, stood quietly, her gaze fixed on the wooden cross. It didn't sparkle like the jewelry she once wore, but it carried a strange weight, as if holding stories she'd never heard. Pope Leo XIV knelt before the altar, gesturing for her to sit on the wooden bench beside it. "Karoline," he said, his voice warm like a father's, "in this room, you don't need to be anyone but yourself." His simple, sincere words brought an unexpected relief, as if her political armor were melting away. She sat still, gripping the wooden cross, her fingers, gliding over its scratched surface. "I don't know where to start," she admitted, her voice low, almost a whisper. "My whole life, I've built an image, strong, confident, never faltering. But here before you, I feel like I'm not enough." Pope Leo XIV turned. To her, his gaze not judgmental, but like a mirror, reflecting truth. "Not enough?" he asked gently. "Or are you beginning to see something greater than yourself?" He stood, stepping toward the cross on the wall, candle light illuminating his face, highlighting wrinkles etched from years of service in Peru. "This cross," he said, pointing to the wooden cross in Leavitt's hands, "was given to me by a mother who lost all three of her children in conflict. She had nothing but faith. Yet she told me, the cross isn't for keeping, but for sharing." He paused, looking directly into her eyes. "Karoline, you've built an image to lead, but lead for what? If not to serve people like her." Leavitt bowed her head, her fingers tightening around the wooden cross. She thought of her years in politics, the passionate speeches, the campaigns where she stood under spotlights, the sparkling cross on her neck like a badge. But now she realized all of it. Fame, power was empty, without purpose. "I always thought leadership was about control," she said, her voice trembling, controlling the image, the narrative. "But you make me wonder, am I truly leading, or just trying to win?" Pope Leo XIV smiled, a kind but meaningful smile. "Leadership isn't about winning, Karoline. It's about kneeling, as Jesus did, to lift others up." He pointed to the wooden cross in her hands. "This cross isn't a burden. It's freedom. Freedom to live for others, not yourself." His words, like cool water, washed away the tangled ambitions in her mind. She remembered her grandfather, who taught her that faith wasn't for show, but for living. "My grandfather used to say," she whispered, "that if you don't know how to kneel, you won't know how to stand." Pope Leo XIV nodded, his eyes gleaming with understanding. "Your grandfather was a wise man," he said. "In my years in Peru, I learned. The cross isn't something to wear, but a path to walk. I saw people with nothing find joy because they carried their cross with love." He spoke of a small village where he helped build a church by hand with impoverished villagers. They had no gold, no jewels, but they had faith, and that faith was stronger than any power you've ever seen. Leavitt listened, feeling a shift within her. She thought of the hardline immigration policies she'd defended, the speeches where she emphasized the nation's strength. But now, before the wooden cross, she wondered, did that strength truly bring good to people like the mother in Peru? Or was it just a way to bolster her own position? "I've talked a lot about faith," she admitted, "but I'm not sure I've lived it." How do you do it? Live for others when the world wants you to be a symbol. Pope Warcraft. 14th looked at her, his eyes like a warm flame. "I am not a symbol. Karoline, I am a servant, and you can be too if you choose." He pointed to the wooden cross. "Keep it not as a gift, but as a promise to find a way to carry your cross, not for fame, but for those who need you most." Leavitt nodded, her hand tightening around the cross, the rough wood, a vivid reminder. She looked up at the cross on the wall, candlelight shimmering on its simple lines. "I don't know if I'm strong enough," she said, her voice soft but sincere. "I'm used to controlling everything." Pope Leo XIV placed a hand on her shoulder. A simple but powerful gesture. "True strength isn't in control," he said. "It's in letting go of the self to find purpose." He stood motioning for her to rise with him. "Go out there, Karoline. Not with a sparkling cross, but with this one in your heart." It stood still, clutching the wooden cross. She felt a new peace, as if an invisible door had opened. The small chapel with its candlelight and wooden cross became a sacred space, where she was no longer the White House press secretary, but a person learning to carry her cross. As the small chapel's door opened, light from the marble hallway flooded in, pulling Karoline Leavitt and Pope Leo XIV back to the reality of the Vatican. Audience chamber. Leavitt, still grasping the wooden cross, stepped out with a calm gaze far different from the sharp confidence she arrived with Pope Leo XIV, his black cassock brushing the floor, walked beside her, his face radiating the serenity of a man who had fulfilled a mission. The audience chamber, silent during the earlier ritual, now erupted with whispers and the clicking of cameras, reporters scribbling frantically, their eyes shifting between astonishment and curiosity. Chief Advisor Sarah Mitchell, standing in a corner, lowered her notepad, her gaze a mix of confusion and admiration. Cardinal Lorenzo Bianchi, near the altar, gave a slight nod, as if confirming that this moment exceeded all expectations. Outside the Vatican, the world began to buzz. Social media exploded with thousands of posts spreading like wildfire. One account wrote, "Leavitt kneels before a wooden cross. Pope Leo XIV just redefined faith." Another commented, asking her to remove the cross. Bold or offensive opinions split sharply. Some called the Pope's action arrogant, believing he intentionally humiliated an American political star. But as the video of the prayer ritual aired, showing Leavitt and Pope Leo XIV kneeling before the wooden cross, the public began to see it in a new light. A post from a Catholic account garnered thousands of shares. "The cross isn't jewelry." Pope Leo XIV reminds us, faith is lived, not shown. Chapter. News outlets quickly picked up the story. CNN ran the headline, "American Pope Challenges American Politician Cross or Fame." The BBC, more measured, described a Vatican moment that may reshape how the world views leadership. A Reuters reporter, Emma Carter, present at the scene, wrote an analysis immediately after. Leavitt entered with ambition, but left with a wooden cross, a symbol no one expected. Her article spread rapidly, quoted on social media and online forums, sparking debate about the true meaning of the cross in a world dominated by image and power. In America, Public reaction was complex. The Trump administration, with its hardline, immigration policies faced criticism from Catholic groups expecting Pope Leo XIV to speak out for immigrants. His request for Leavitt to remove the sparkling cross and kneel before the wooden one was called a political jab by some Trump supporters. But others, especially Catholics, saw a deeper message. A Chicago pastor posted on social media, Pope Leo at 14th isn't against Leavitt. He's teaching her, and all of us, that the cross is about service, not power. CD. The post received thousands of likes, highlighting a shift in public perception. Sarah Mitchell Leavitt's advisor stood quietly in the audience chamber, her phone buzzing with dozens of notifications from the Washington communications team. She knew this moment could redefine Leavitt's career or destroy it. She shouldn't have knelt, Mitchell whispered to an aide worried about the reaction from conservative voters. But looking at Leavitt, holding the wooden cross, her eyes, no longer those of a politician, anxious about image, but of someone seeking meaning. Mitchell, though reluctant, began to realize this wasn't a defeat, but a new beginning. Cardinal Bianchi, still standing near the altar, felt a spark of hope. He had feared Pope Leo XIV's actions would be misunderstood, but now he saw the press not just recording the event, but being drawn into it. A BBC reporter in the corner turned to a colleague. This isn't ordinary news. It's a lesson. Cameras remained fixed on Leavitt and Pope Leo XIV, but the room's atmosphere had shifted from the tension of a political event to the reverence of a sacred moment. On social media platforms, debates raged on. A political commentator wrote, "Leavitt just put herself in a weak position, kneeling before the Pope." Not the image of a strong leader, but another account countered, "She's not weaker, she's stronger, because she dared to change." The video of the prayer ritual showing Leavitt holding the wooden cross spread worldwide, from Rome to New York, Tokyo, to Paulo. Online forums overflowed with comments from criticism to praise, but all agreed this was an unforgettable moment. Leavitt stood beside Pope Leo XIV, the wooden cross in her hand, seemingly the focus of every gaze. She said nothing, but her eyes spoke volumes. A transformation was unfolding, not just in her, but in how the world viewed leadership and faith. Pope Leo XIV, with the calm of someone who had seen too much suffering, and hope, looked out at the room. "The world is watching," he said to Leavitt, his voice soft but clear. "But what matters isn't what they see, but what you choose to live." That moment, captured by dozens of cameras, wasn't just news. It was a call not only to Leavitt, but to all those watching from St. Peter's Square to distant street corners. The wooden cross, small but powerful, had become a symbol of change, not just in a young politician, but in a world yearning for meaning. As Karoline Leavitt and Pope Leo XIV stepped out of the small chapel, light from the Vatican's marble hallway enveloped them as if pulling them back into a world of buzz with the event that had just unfolded. Leavitt, still clutching the wooden cross, stood tall, her eyes radiating a new resolve far different from the sharp confidence of ours. Earlier, Pope Leo XIV, in his simple black cassock, walked beside her, his face serene like a man who had planted a seed and trusted it would grow. The audience chamber, though still crowded with press and officials, now carried a different air, no longer tense, but filled with quiet reverence. Cardinal Lorenzo Bianchi, near the altar, gave a slight nod, his eyes gleaming with hope. Chief Advisor Sarah Mitchell, though still worried about the media fallout, couldn't deny that Leavitt had changed, not weakened but strengthened in a deeper way. Globally, the event sparked a wave of reflection on leadership and faith. At a university in Nairobi, students held a seminar on the lesson of the wooden cross, discussing how leadership could serve rather than dominate. In Manila, a group of lay people launched a Carry the Cross campaign calling for donations to the poor, inspired by Pope Leo XIV's actions and article. In Italy's Lost Stempera remarked, Pope Leo XIV with a wooden cross achieved what international summits could not, bringing the world closer through humility. Online forums from Reddit to Catholic Facebook groups brimmed with questions. What is true leadership? What does the cross mean in a world driven by ambition? At the Vatican, Pope Leo XIV continued his mission, undeterred by the media storm. In a prayer session at the Sion Chapel, he spoke of a message of peace for Gaza, calling for compassion for those suffering. The cross teaches us to look at others, he said in a brief homily live, reamed on social media, not to judge, but to love his words. Widely quoted, reinforced his image as a pope who not only led the church, but challenged the world to examine its values. An Italian journalist posted, Pope Leo XIV needs no golden crown. The wooden cross is his crown. Seat. Leavitt, back in America, faced pressure from her communications team. Sarah Mitchell, in an urgent meeting in Washington, warned the public is divided. Some call you a loser, but others see you as a symbol of change. Leavitt, sitting quietly, her hand tracing. The wooden cross didn't respond immediately. She thought of her past speeches, where she used the sparkling cross as a political tool. But now, the wooden cross in her hand held a different meaning. Not something to show off, but a reminder of responsibility. I don't care about winning or losing, she finally said, her voice calm but firm. I want to do what's right. The Vatican event not only changed Leavitt, but inspired millions. A young woman in Mumbai posted, I thought leadership meant being strong, but Leavitt and Pope Leo XIV showed me it's about daring to kneel. TT. A teacher in London held a class on humility, using the prayer ritual video as a lesson. The wooden cross, small but powerful, became a global symbol appearing in articles, sermons, and even street art. In Bogota, Karoline Leavitt sat alone in her small Washington office, the desk lamp casting light on the wooden cross on her desk. Night had fallen, the city outside glowing with lights, but she only heard the soft patter of rain against the window. The wooden cross, with its rough scratches, lay quietly, like a silent friend reminding her of the Vatican moment. She opened her notebook, her pen gliding across the page, capturing her surging thoughts. I used to think leadership was standing at the top under the spotlight, she wrote. But today, I learned it's about daring to kneel to let your heart be moved. The wooden cross, unsparkling and unassuming, had become a lighthouse guiding her through the waves of ambition and pressure. Thousands of miles away, at the Vatican, Pope Leo XIV stood in the Sion Chapel light from stained glass. Painting streaks of color on his black cassock, he knelt before an altar, touching another wooden cross similar to the one he gave Leavitt. In the silence, he prayed for those suffering from refugees in Gaza to Totototu, the impoverished families he once met in Peru. Lord, he whispered, grant us strength to carry your cross, to love and serve. His prayer, simple yet profound, echoed as a reminder that the cross was not a symbol of power, but a path of compassion. Leave. It stopped writing, her eyes fixed on the wooden cross. She thought of her past days, standing before thousands, the sparkling cross on her neck, her voice passionately defending administration policies. But now she wondered What had those words done? For the forgotten, she recalled Pope Leo XIV's words in the small chapel. Leadership is kneeling to lift others up. The wooden cross in her hand, with scratches telling the story of the Peruvian mother, seemed to challenge her to live differently, for those without a voice, not for the spotlight. In Rome, the bells of St. Peter's Basilica rang through the night, like a call to hope. Pope Leo XIV, after his prayer, stepped onto a balcony, looking down at the now quiet St. Peter's Square. He thought of Leavitt the moment she dared to remove the sparkling cross and kneel before the wooden one. He didn't want her to become a symbol, only to carry that cross in her heart as he had done in Peru. In a brief, live-reamed homily, he said, "The cross isn't something to wear. It's something to live, to bring God's love to the world." His words, shared millions of times, became a flame, illuminating hearts seeking meaning. Leavitt in Washington stood holding the wooden cross and walked to the window. The rain continued. The night sky seemed brighter, as if carrying a promise. She thought of the challenges ahead: media, pressure, political division, and her own doubts. But the wooden cross, small but mighty, reminded her she didn't need to be perfect, only courageous. She opened her notebook again, writing a final line. "Today, I learned the cross isn't a burden, but wings. It lifts me not to shine, but to serve." Bells from a nearby church rang, mingling with the rain. Leavitt smiled for the first time in months, not for cameras, but from a deep peace. Pope Leo XIV at the Vatican also smiled, looking at Rome's sky, knowing the seed he planted had begun to sprout. The wooden cross, a symbol of sacrifice, had connected two people, two worlds, and sparked a global movement of leadership and compassion. The world, from small streets to grand squares, began to see the cross, not just as a symbol, but as a call to live for others. The story of Karoline Leavitt and Pope Leo XIV, with the moment of removing the sparkling cross to kneel before the wooden cross, offers a profound lesson on leadership and faith, especially relevant to life in the United States in 2025, a society grappling with political division, media pressure, and a crisis of trust. In the American context, where controversial immigration policies and social media debates rage, Leavitt's act of relinquishing a symbol of power for a simple wooden cross reflects the courage to let go of personal image for a greater purpose. The private conversation in the chapel where Pope Leo XIV shared the story of the Peruvian mother and emphasized that the cross is the path of compassion serves as a reminder that true leadership lies not in ostentation, but in service. This lesson is particularly vital in American culture, where success is often measured by fame and influence. Americans today can learn from Leavitt, who dared to confront her inner conflict and choose the path of humility, applying it to their lives instead of chasing the spotlight. Listen to and support the forgotten, like immigrants or marginalized communities. Pope Leo XIV's actions, rejecting extravagance and living for the poor, are a call to live true to core values despite societal pressures. Carry your own wooden cross, whether it's compassion, sincerity, or responsibility to build a united community, overcome division, and rediscover meaning in a turbulent world. Subscribe to the channel to explore more profound lessons on faith and leadership, like the story of the wooden cross. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next.